listening to the Noble Life podcast, brought to you by Noble Life. Noble Life is an online health and lifestyle coaching system that guides you through the long-term improvements of your physical, psychological, personal and practical life. On this podcast, we bring you guests from different specialities who embody the Noble Code of pride, passion, purpose and power. Through our guests' stories and experiences, you'll be inspired and informed on how to optimize yourself and improve on balancing your own lifestyle to become the best version of yourself. On this episode of the Noble Life podcast, we have Faiz Ariffin, who is a Malaysian professional natural bodybuilder who's just placed first in the men's athletic physique at the WBPF Indonesia, and is only 4 days out before he flies to Korea for the World Championships. Now, I've got Faiz on here because he's doing quite incredible stuff as a pro bodybuilder, and he's a self-described skinny Malaysian kid who has turned pro bodybuilder, and I wanted to hear more about his story and what he has learnt on the journey, and to share with the listeners as well. So welcome to the podcast.
Nice to hear from you again, Fraser. It's been a while since we met. I think, if not mistaken, it was like a couple of months ago in Melbourne, I believe.
Yeah, we were down in Melbourne. We were at the same conference. So trying to get this podcast was actually a little bit of a challenge because you're doing your run-up and doing your prep work. Trying to find time between you meeting your sponsors and you not being completely carb depleted was quite challenging, because obviously we didn't want to have you on when you had absolutely zero energy. So I'm glad that I managed to grab you.
Well, as we speak, I literally just had like 2 chicken breasts and a bit of Brussels sprout and some broccoli just to ensure that I have sufficient amount of energy to speak with you.
First of all, I just want to ask, what are you doing in the moment with regards to your training, with your bodybuilding, which has basically got you to this stage, because you're at quite a high level?
Well, to be honest, Fraser, like what I do right now is the same thing what I did 10 years ago. Is the same thing day in, day out, training, eating well, and just putting in the reps. And what I started to realize is how I was back then, 10 years ago, or should I put it 12 years ago, when I start to get a bit more serious into bodybuilding. It's the same thing. But what I start to realize is as you train, years goes by, you start to get a different perspective when it comes to training. You get better, you become more efficient, and you just improve upon it. And I think when you talk about bodybuilding, back then when I first started, I remember the first 1-2 years where you start to go through all the Men's Health magazine, you buy Flex magazine, you read all these articles, books, you want to learn as much. And at that time, you were like, we call it the knowledge hall, where you just grab whatsoever and learn, read, and you just feel that as if you know everything, right? You think you know everything, but then again, as you start to get longer into this game, you start to humble yourself, where you open up your mind, and whatever that you learn, you apply and you keep implementing, and we call it test and run. But I think leading to where I am today is just a matter of just being very consistent to what I do day in, day out, and having it part of my routine so that it continues gradually progress. Looking back, my first competition back in 2000, I would say 2011, my first time stepping on stage, which was Mr. Kuala Lumpur. And the first time I got on stage, it wasn't primarily reason to actually compete. I didn't have a thought to become a bodybuilder, to be honest, Fraser. I mean, growing up, since I was young, I was very athletic. I was a runner, and then I got into representing my school, 100 meter, 200 meter, since I was 8 years old, leading up to 17 years old. So being active is always there. My lower body development has been always my strong point. And I think heading to my 16, 17, when I started to lift weight merely for sports performance, that shifted when I finished my high school. And I think during that time, when I got into bodybuilding, the reason wasn't actually to build muscle to go on stage. I mean, back then I used to criticize all these bodybuilders. Man, what's wrong with them wearing underwear on stage, flexing? I was making fun of it, and surprisingly enough, I'm one of them now. But I remember back then it was merely trying to make myself look good. I want to feel confident. And back then back then I was skinny. I was lean. I was small. So I built muscle, and that time inspiration was Taylor Lautner. I remember those days when Twilight was in Men's Health, they were like articles sharing what workout he does, what supplement he take, how he trains, and it was a continuously learning over time. I think that's how it started. And going on stage, it was just merely of the gym guy was like, dude, you have a nice physique. Hey, let's bring you to a bodybuilding competition. And I was like, what is bodybuilding competition? And then I got told that you just wear Speedo pants and rub yourself with oil and just be on stage. And then the rest is his story. But looking back, I remember on stage, I was about 69 kilo, 69, 68. I was quite lean. And I remember the night before, I didn't follow the rules of bodybuilding, which is like carb loading and whatnot. I was literally on the field shooting for Asiata. I was playing football on the field. I was overnight, I think about 8 hours just running on the field. So it got me on stage pretty lean. Of course, veins all popping out from my stomach, but I was, I think, flat. But I managed to get third placing, which is quite cool. So I got addicted, and then it snowballs to competing every single year without failure. And I guess that also comes to me having this attitude of never learn to quit. And when I start something, I will do it well all the way until I get it there. And looking back at the ASEAN Championship, which was about 3 weeks prior, I was on stage only 76 kilo. Since 2011, leading up to this date, 2019, I've gained probably about 6-7 kilos. When it comes to body weight movement, it's not a lot. And it's less than a kilo per year. Probably if you look at first 2-3 years is a bit fast, but that's natural bodybuilding. You won't be able to gain significant amount of muscle within a year. We're looking at about like 4 kilo in 1 month, 2 months, and that's not the case. And it can be demotivating. Even me being able to be first placing, to be honest, Fraser, I never thought that I would want. Hard work pay off, I guess, and not to quit.
So just there's a couple of things I want to go back to just from what you've said there. The first thing is very early on, you were always active, you were always into sports. And it was more just about looking good, which is what got you into bodybuilding. Now, I know from my own experience and from knowing bodybuilders who do compete as well that there's a lot more of a psychological aspect to bodybuilding than most people actually realize. Mm-hmm. So when you started to actually get into bodybuilding, you spoke about the physical aspect, you spoke about wanting to look better.
Yeah.
But there would definitely have been a psychological aspect of confidence, of empowerment, and feeling more like you were settling into yourself as you were developing as a bodybuilder as well as a man, as it were. Can you tell us how that shaped you as a very young man when you first started getting involved in this?
Yeah. I think looking back to who I was back then, I would consider bodybuilding is a very selfish sport. And looking back, I was active. I play football. I play basketball. I play football quite competitively. I play for club. Play a lot of football, and that revolves around team game. So there's a difference between team sports and individualized sports. It's a very selfish sport, and it requires sort of most of the time in the day, which I presume that almost all bodybuilders, all people that are striving to achieve that physique will go into this hole where you're so sucked up into yourself. And I started to realize this is something that a lot of people are struggling with. And I guess that over time start to tune off, where you start to be able to be managing your time even more efficiently. It's always going to be pros and cons, you know. I mean, for me, bodybuilding really allows me to improve my discipline when it comes to being punctual in terms of getting to the gym, make sure you train, and at the same time ensuring that the frequency you train, you eat well, plan your training. You have a lot of lessons in it. At the same time, it can be two-sided sword if you are too focused on one thing. So I think at the end of the day, if you approach bodybuilding in a way that can enhance your life and you work around it, and I presume a lot of listeners over here they have a lot of commitments when it comes to juggling their work, their family, their alone time. And if you incorporate bodybuilding, lifting weights, training in a way that empowering you, at the same time have that space to balance yourself and have that flexibility, you can actually push yourself to a whole new level. I mean, I'm not just talking about discipline. I think when you talk about psychological part of it, where it strengthens you, because I think bodybuilding teaches you a lot about engaging the muscle and also visualization. And I think Arnold once said this before, where he keep visualizing the outcome of how his physique wants to become. And I can tell that his visualization power is very, very strong. And despite him started off just being a bodybuilder and then pushed to become a world-class actor and pushing himself to becoming a governor, I mean, that's a whole new level set point. And starting off as a bodybuilder, that sort of like one of the things that I start to discover that could potentially push you to the next level. But I think the challenge is always the stigma, where a lot of people have this thought process where bodybuilders mostly are stupid, they're dumb.
Yeah, and I think you can kind of look at the world stage when you look at that as well, because it is, you're right, that's a big misconception. It's the meathead misconception that people that lift weights aren't very clever. But look at all the professional athletes, all of whom lift weights, all of them. You know, any very high level athlete in any sport lifts weights. And all of those techniques and all the science originates from the sport of bodybuilding. And then it trickles down into the athletic sort of sportsmanship, and then that trickles down into the general public. But it's no coincidence that a lot of these professional bodybuilders and a lot of the, you know, elite athletes in the world leave their sport and become fairly successful businessmen. You know, of course that doesn't always happen, but generally they do quite well. And it's because of exactly what you were speaking about there. You've got the physical attributes that come with it, but you've also got the psychological strength and the practical discipline that's required for the timekeeping, for your accountability, for your skill set to actually set out different tasks and goals and focuses. And that's what makes them successful, not just in their sport, but in life in general.
It can be done, you know. Like, I think we have this misconception as well that if you want to do bodybuilding, you have to sacrifice everything. And this is always commonly one-sided process where, oh, it is very hard to juggle, you have this and that. But if you start to shift and have that productivity mindset, and structure your day, I think you can make it happen. I managed to get a chance to meet Lee Norton back in Gold Coast. It was 2 years back. Came across him and just asked him a few questions about basic structure, because at the same time you want to know how they do it and knowing that they'll be able to build that muscle. And it's all about time, because I think a lot of time people fail. People start to sidetrack or change different path or give up or trying to go on a shortcut is because they aren't willing to stay on the lane and actually doing the same boring work over and over again. As sexy as it is about doing the boring work and start to be passionately loving doing it and find the purpose, reason behind doing it, so that you will sooner or later get to the end result.
I would completely agree with that. And just on my own experience with regards to training, when I started to get more involved in bodybuilding style training, rather than historically my training was all rugby, was more martial arts, very functional, which was all really good. But as you spoke about, a lot of this was team training. So even when you're doing martial arts, you're going to a class, you're sparring, it's a team environment. When you're rugby, it's a team environment.
Sure.
So when you're doing that kind of training, it's a case of this is when you come, you turn up, you go, you do. But when I started to do more bodybuilding style training, I had no choice that if I wanted to do this, I had to get better at my time management.
Agreed.
I had to be more committed to what I set myself out to do. Not what my boss told me, not what my mum told me, but what I set for myself. And I noticed that in my corporate career at that time, I was actually getting better at my job because of bodybuilding.
You were an engineer, right? If not mistaken, you told me before you were working in Petronas, Malaysia.
I was working in oil and gas, and I was working within the engineering department. I was actually running the engineers that went offshore, and obviously going offshore myself as well. But I found that from the lessons I learned through training, I was actually better at that aspect of the job, at the planning, at making sure that everybody was in the right place at the right time, that I was getting everything done that I needed to get done, because effectively I was practicing it in my personal life, and that transgressed into my practical life of work. You can learn a lot more than simply just your physical aspects. Yes, the physical aspects are the surface level, but we've already just spoken about there that the psychological aspects of having more confidence, of having more empowerment to do what you feel you need to do, having more focus, the practical aspects of potentially getting better at your job because of it, having better accountability and time management. And of course, it also impacts on your personal life as well. Now, yes, when you get to a very high level, and I'm sure you'll admit this, that when you sacrifice the way you are right now, when you're cutting out, a lot of food, and when you're going through this prep, it's got a lot of strain on your life. But there's a lot of positives that come along with it. Before we go into this, I will highlight the obvious. The obvious one is that when you are training, your natural testosterone levels rise, your body looks better, you're feeling more confident, and as a result, generally, your sex life will get better. But that's not necessarily what I was wanting to talk about. So I wanted to get that out there so that was out there. But on the other personal aspects with regards to your partner, with your spouse or your family, your parents, your brothers, your sisters, how do you feel that bodybuilding has either positively or negatively impacted those relationships? And I'm sure you would agree that it's more positive than it is negative.
Yeah. Well, generally, I think when we talk about bodybuilding, like lifting weights, of course, it will enhance part of it, and it becomes better. But if you talk about like dieting, contest prep, being on an extremely low body fat, which takes a lot of your time in the day. Basically, I'm doing it full time now. Like I have morning session, I have evening session, and of course, juggling work in between. You tend to get easily annoyed when your body fat is very low, which is quite common. I even have a lot of people when they are at this set point of body fat, they tend to go into the rage mode. They get snappy easily. They get into all that, which are quite common and is normal.
And it can also go the other way as well. And a lot of people don't even realize that when people have got a very high body fat percentage, they're on an emotional roller coaster. It's effectively, and you'll back me up on this one.
I'm backing you up on this one, and I totally agree.
Your hormone levels. So when your body fat's very low, or when your body fat's high, your hormones are not in equilibrium. So it makes you more aggressive or more likely to snap or get sad. And that's when you see the most ripped guy in the gym sitting there close to tears because somebody made a comment, or you get somebody who's very overweight getting massively triggered because somebody commented about their cat. It's all about getting that middle ground. And although what you're doing is massively admirable and the competition prep's incredibly difficult, you will agree with me when I say that it is not for everyone. And it's something that you personally would only do for the competition, and then you're going to bring your body fat levels back up to a healthy level.
For sure. Generally, on day-to-day basis, I'm quite healthy. I eat healthy food most of the time. But like I said, I think bodybuilding, when you go to a super ultra low body fat and most of your time are taken toll on training intensely and on a calorie deficit as well, that is actually the challenge. And I feel that at this state normally is a very short window where you spend to deep dive, and then after that you exit and be at a comfortable level. And that depends on person to person. Some people, they might have a slightly higher set point. Some people have a slightly lower set point. And I feel that, like you said, at the end of the day, it must be in that healthy range where you feel happy, you feel comfortable, and you can give your level best and doesn't compromise your day-to-day activity. Because I feel that at the end of the day, whatever that you do, either be it any sports, it shouldn't be too obsessed into that put you off to the relationship you have around. At the same time, it should empower your relationship around, be it family, friends, spouse, at workspace, and as well for you to perform well when you're at work. I think we look at a holistic overview. I mean, we talk about your physically, your emotionally, your mentally, and as well general well-being. So, I mean, for me, I take it to the extreme end because I choose this path. And like you said, my driving factor right now, considering that I'm a national athlete, so I compete for Malaysia. And I was always had this vision during young age that I wanted to be representing my country. Funny enough, it wasn't sprinting. I don't have the height, and probably I didn't have the right coach to train me during that time, to give me the kind of training system, the path for me to actually enhance my physique, my training, so that I can be probably world class or even ASEAN sprinter. I mean, I'm blessed right now that I'm able to do bodybuilding and do it in a way that allow me to empower, to inspire people around me, especially among the Malaysians. At the same time, show people that this is something that you can look into, because like you said, when you're too overweight, it doesn't do any good. When you're too underweight, it doesn't really do you any good as well, because I was once a skinny kid and I know how it feels. And I was that kid as well, that being bullied in the bus, going to school. Yeah, I guess everyone have this journey, and I think experience doing it, actually going through doing it, allow you to have that revelation, to have you the exposure, the experience to push you to where you are. And looking back, Fraser, I wish that I have me right now to coach me when I was entering bodybuilding, so that I don't have to go through all the struggle, the challenges that I've gone through for the past 9-10 years, and actually shortcut it from a decade worth of experience and wisdom to 1 year, even few months, so that I can just focus on what is necessary for me to actually enhance and get the result. And that's something that I find very important and valuable.
Absolutely, mate. And it's not just in bodybuilding, it's in anything. I mean, that's the biggest benefit of finding someone and reaching out and finding somebody who you can actually take guidance from, finding a coach or a Sherpa, if you like. And it's important that you find somebody who's not just talking about one aspect, that they're looking at all of the aspects, and they've lived the journey and they've done the work. And I know that's something that you're doing now, that you're helping other guys that are looking to get into bodybuilding, and you're coaching along those lines as well. And we'll definitely talk about that in a bit. But just on what you were talking about there with regards to the being too high or being too low, it's not just the physical aspects that impacts. Because obviously, if you're too low or too high in body fat, or you're unhealthy in any way, then your physical is a massive impact. And your hormone levels are not going to be optimized, and you're not going to feel as great. And you're not going to be able to get the sleep quality that you want because of that as well. But it goes deeper, because psychologically your confidence is going to be hit, whether you want to believe it or not. But from somebody like yourself who's doing bodybuilding and is going to the extreme, albeit to the extreme low end, it has the same effect So you'll know that when you go very, very low, your relationship with your partner isn't quite as happy because you're not as happy within yourself. You're not feeling as confident even just walking down the street. And this is somebody who looks completely ripped. But because inside yourself, your hormone levels aren't quite right, and psychologically, you're starting to feel that doubt creep in, it still happens. So, and the reason I'm talking about that is because a lot of people that are very overweight and unhealthy in that direction, they think that that's just because of their situation, but actually it's a physical and psychological thing that they can do something about. And it's about getting healthier. And then your personal life and your practical life start to improve as well along with it. Now, the difference between that and people that drop down into that low body fat as bodybuilders is that the bodybuilders are aware of that and they'll drop down and then bring themselves back up to that healthy level. But it's very important that we're talking to you who has experienced that and is able to say that unquestionably, that there is a massive impact on your life when you go too low or too high.
I think from my end, I experience more so on lethargic in terms of how is my energy level like during the day. And I find that I can't do as much workload during the day because of restriction amount of energy that I have in a day. Hormonal wise, I can't really tell. So, I mean, of course, your testosterone level drops a lot. That's the obvious thing. You don't really have that drive to, you call it sex drive, that kind of stuff. Like for men, that's normal. That's what I have. In terms of how I feel, it's more so of me feeling lethargic during the day easily. And sometimes when I'm hungry, especially after training, if I don't eat at a certain time, which is actually a primary factor for you to consider if you're on a very low body fat, the timing of the meal, is that I get more lethargic than normal and I get tired and sometimes I get a bit snappy. I get annoyed easily. So for me, annoyed, I'll say remarks in terms of cynical, or I just keep quiet. I think that's my character to begin with. And I think probably the first year is more lethargic than ever going to dieting because I was crash dieting. I didn't know what is calories. I didn't know what's macros. And literally I was just eating tilapia and just 3 tilapia in a day and the others all just nothing. So when I got to, that kind of diet, that crazy, like what's 800 calories, that was crazy and that's not supposed to be done that way. I learned the hard way because I was told to do that way. I think that also comes in regards to having that right person to actually guide you so that you don't have to go through all that.
That's a very good point as well, because a lot of people, whether they're doing bodybuilding or whether they're trying to cut weight for like a martial art competition or whether they're just trying to lose a bit of weight, is they don't do it properly and they're not cutting out calories smart.
Yeah.
So they do like these extreme diets where they're only eating one thing. Yeah. I heard somebody talking about this the other day there, where they only ate potatoes.
Well, I guess for me, all falls back to knowledge, At the end of the day, like if you have lack of knowledge, you have lack of wisdom, information in that respective field, that is something that you're bound to experience. Like, for example, a person that are very, very good at, for example, in their workspace, they are good at accounts, right? They are very good at accounts, but when it comes to technical aspect of engineer, probably they have no clue, right? And the person learning that engineering probably could take a number of years and a lot of funny silly mistake in regards to the engineer's mindset perspective, And we talk about doctor knowing every single organs in the body, every single tissue, nerve, whatsoever, compared to a person whom are just a rubbish collector. Just got anything. I mean, everyone have their own skill set. Like in regards to myself, I have that skill set in bodybuilding, nutrition and training and whatsoever relating to this. And I remember back then, I mean, even I myself gone through the extreme end where at one point during those early 2010, 2009, 8, where we talk about clean eating, where the chicken breast all are just boiled and then you eat like that, no salt, no nothing. And then they were going to a point even before going on stage, you just have an ice like 24 hours because you cut off water like a week or something like that, which is insane, which now I don't have to do all that. It's just like 12 hours prior, reduce the amount of water because technically 70% of your body is already water, it's just a matter of how low is your body fat, and it takes time for actually to prep properly. I got into extreme end where you talk about flexible dieting. At one point, I think it was early in 2013, 2012, where everyone was talking about flexible dieting, where you can just eat Pop-Tarts, you can eat all kind of sweet stuff and still get shredded. And then I go to the extreme end where I feel shit. I get the calories in, I get into great shape as well, but I notice that the feeling inside is not healthy, So, you will bound to go to the extreme end at one point or another. We talk about keto, we talk about Atkins, but I think at the end of the day, what's important, Fraser, I find that is it sustainable, Like if I were to stick to that diet, probably I wouldn't be able to sustain for another 12 years, We emphasize on this a lot when we had a conversation where all falls back to facts. What are the facts? What are the results? And are you moving to the direction that you want to go? And if it's not, optimize again the week after so that you keep continually progress further. Even a slight win is still a win.
The other thing, just to base on that one as well, is that it's for lifestyle. We're talking about the extremes, but I believe in everything in moderation, including moderation.
Agree.
Because people always say, oh yeah, just moderate everything. Agreed. But every now and then, you have to let moderation take that back seat. And that's exactly what you do when it comes to the bodybuilding. Instead of doing moderate healthy eating and healthy training, you go that extra mile to become the elite.
For sure.
And that's the same in every walk of life. Whether that be flexible dieting, where normally you're having a good time and you're very, very aware of what you're eating. In my opinion, flexible dieting should also make sure that you are eating the correct things. Not necessarily massively clean, but having the correct things included so that you're healthy, not just eating Pop-Tarts and McDonald's and hitting your macros. That's not what it's about.
I was that guy, eating McDonald's, Pop-Tarts, and just trying to fit in without caring about the micronutrition of it, the amount of fiber, the amount of minerals, the amount of all the essentials.
It's a very quick way to make yourself sick, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's not just with regards to bodybuilding or diet. That same lesson, that same aspect of everything in moderation, including moderation, can be related to work, where what you should be doing is keeping a good work-to-life balance most of the time. But then sometimes you're going to take a holiday, you're going to take a vacation, and you're not going to do any work for a couple of weeks. Or there's going to be a big project that comes up and you're going to have to go hell for leather at work for a week or so. Because everything's in moderation, including that moderation. And you can apply that to relationships as well. Normally it should be a very healthy relationships. If you ever got married, or if you're going to be getting married, during that run up to a wedding, you've got to go to the extremes of that relationship to make sure that during the planning and during everything with regards to the wedding, you don't end up losing it with each other, because you've got to make sure that you're very strong as a unit. And vice versa. Sometimes you've got to give each other the space that's required. So every aspect of life has these same lessons that you can learn from a sport such as bodybuilding, the same way that you have. You know what I mean?
Agree. Completely agree.
Now, what I want to talk about now is, what are your goals? What are your focuses for now and the next year with regards to your competing and with regards to building your training, actually? So tell us a little bit about your focus and your vision.
Well, I have been coaching ever since even the high school, and I have this character of whatever that I learn, I read, I share, so that the person can benefit. At the same time, I know that when I teach someone, I can get better at actually remembering it. And I think during the school days, I remember I bought this magazine called the How to Sprint Better. I bought a few books. I remember I saved we call it Hari Raya. We celebrate Hari Raya in Malaysia, where we get ang pao every time we go back hometown. We get like $10 note, $15 note. So I save up. I remember I bought this US international book, cost me about $120. I save up, I bought the book, I read, I learn, I teach my friends, and we make an effort to actually learn. So I guess the coaching part of it has always been instilled during a young age. I remember I downloaded, last time we had the iPod, I downloaded the video from the computer, and that time it was TMNet streaming. So I download it and then I bring it to school, show my friends, okay, this is how you do it, you're going to try it, and if it works, you do it. So I think leading up to now, I've been coaching since 2012 as I'm doing my bodybuilding. I wrote my first article on bodybuilding.com, which I was featured on. I was the first Malaysian to be featured on bodybuilding.com as a teen amateur of the week, where I shared my articles about how my training, how's my dieting, and I think that also went viral across all Malaysia, and they were calling me out as if, hey, you're the guy from the bodybuilding.com. And then from there, I got spiraled to a few US website, Master Doc, and few website asking me to write articles, sharing my thought process on training, nutrition, and whatnot. I think my goal right now, I really want to change the mindset, the belief system towards all the Malaysian here in my country in regards to training, nutrition, and not buying into all these quick fixes, instant gratification about, for example, I mean, you aware of this, all these products selling you empty promises, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's all about building that balance, that routine in you, so that you do the right habit, the right system in you, so that you can progressively be better, right? So I really want to bring down, when it comes to economic scale, of the obesity rate, because Malaysia is ranked one of the highest obesity rate in ASEAN region, which is crazy, and especially among the rural area. I mean, our food is very eccentric towards like fattening stuff. I mean, you've been here, you know how good the food is. So probably if I can start to share more on the basic fundamental when it comes to nutrition, what should you eat when it comes to protein, carbs, fats, and how can you balance it, I think that will be the most satisfying thing that I can do. You really want to help someone, you really want to teach someone and encourage them and give them all the tools, the skill set, so that they can just go and do and just get the result. I think for me, coaching is more so on accountability as well. But I think the people that didn't do well in it, when it comes to coaching, they expect result. They expect by paying, they will get result without actually putting in the work. And that is something that I start to realize, that the shift of mindset need to be changed.
Now, what you mentioned there that I thought was very interesting was the food, especially in this region of the world, because the Southeast Asian islands and countries, the food is very high fat and very high carbohydrate.
For sure.
And what a lot of people don't realize, and it's something that I find this very interesting, I find history interesting, big into the nutrition and that side of things as well, is that the reason the food is like that is because historically there was not much of it. Mm-hmm. So they had to make it calorie dense. Now, obviously back then they weren't sitting calculating macros, but they knew what filled them up, they knew what gave them energy to keep them moving with not very much of it, which is why you get things like Laxad and things like that, which are very, very high fats to keep you moving throughout the day. But nowadays, there's an abundance of this same food, and it tastes amazing. There is no doubt about that.
Yeah.
One of my biggest guilty pleasures is that I genuinely could sit down and eat a family-sized mutton muttabak easily. But you can't do that. It's not right. It's not good for you, because it is so high in fat and carbs, very dense, and it's not very good for you in large quantities. Yeah. So one thing I've noticed in this area is that people do eat the same foods, but in much larger quantities, and that's one of the biggest reasons for it. And educating that by the way you were talking there is very, very important. And when you're talking about the expectations, that is not a regional thing. I've got to tell you, that's an international thing. Yeah. People think that they can pay money and get the result. But, and I've spoken about this before in the podcast, but I'm going to reiterate it very quickly, is there is 4 different elements with regards to commitment. And it doesn't matter what you're looking at. It doesn't matter if it's work. It doesn't matter if it's your health and fitness. It doesn't matter if it's a relationship. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's getting a dog. It's all the same 4. The first one is money. There's always a financial commitment to any commitment these days. Now, it's most important and least important, depending on how you look at it, but it's the initial one, it's the first one. And this is when so many people think, well, I've paid, that's my commitment done. But it's not. Because once you've done commitment with finances, you've then got to commit your time. Once you've committed your time, you've then got to commit your effort. It doesn't matter if you're turning up and sitting in a lecture hall at university. If you're not putting any effort into learning, you're not going to get anything out of it. And the same goes for everything else. And the fourth one is trust and honesty. And if you don't have trust and you're not honest about what you're doing, you can just throw the rest of it out.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have the financial investment, the time investment, the effort, and the trust. Those 4 are what make commitment. And only when you have those 4 are you going to get the results properly.
I agree.
That's something that I use very strongly within my system. Well, that and the code, which is very important as well, which is your pride, passion, purpose, and power, which you mentioned earlier on with regards to making sure that you are aware of what's going on, aware of what you're doing, making sure you know how you feel about things, making sure you've got a focus. And only then do you get the power, which is the results. And it's very, very nice when I speak to somebody like yourself who has very similar sort of thinking with regards to how they went from where they were to the success that they are right now. Now, with that said, the last thing I want to ask you is quite simple.
Sure.
If you are speaking to somebody on the street and they ask you, I would like to get involved in this thing that you've been speaking about, this bodybuilding malarkey, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to them?
That's a good one. There's a lot. One thing that pops up in my mind right now is if you want it, do it. Give your heart and soul with full focus until you get it, or at least until you taste it and you decide whether this is something that you want to go all the way.
Good piece of advice. I like that. And I'm just going to add on to that and say that if that's something that you're wanting to do, give it a try, taste the result, and move forward. But make sure you don't hurt yourself. Reach out to somebody that knows. Okay, there's no reason that you need to try something yourself and get hurt. We've got the wealth of the full human knowledge on the internet. It's all there. But sometimes that's too much, and I always think that it's a good idea to reach out to an actual person who knows what they're talking about, like yourself, who might be able to help them within that journey. And with that said, man, I just want to thank you for being on the podcast. And before you go, can you just tell us how people can get in touch with you? If they want to reach out, follow your story, follow your results, maybe get involved with getting into bodybuilding themselves with regards to your coaching, how do they find you? On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, website?
You can check me out. I have a website called faizariffin.com, FAIZARIFFIN.com, Faiz Ariffin. Facebook, Instagram, all social media is just Faiz Ariffin. Simple. Cool.
And for anybody listening that is a little bit confused about spelling or whatever, don't worry about it. It's all going to be in the show notes of the podcast. Next thing here, mate, is I just want to wish you luck, because 4 days out,
yeah,
you're doing absolutely amazing. I've been following you on social media and I'm seeing how much work you're putting into this. And I really believe that you're going to do phenomenally in the world competition coming up.
Thank you very much, Fraser. I'll do my best. At the end of the day, the result is the result, as long as I think I do my best and I give my best.
You have been listening to the Noble Life podcast. To find out more about our guests, please take a look at the episode's show notes. This episode was brought to you by Noble Life, the online health and lifestyle coaching system. Noble Life works both with men and women living hectic lifestyles who know that they must improve their life's balance, their health and their happiness to become their best version. Noble Life coaches each aspect required to achieve this through the 4 pillars of physical, psychological, personal and practical. To find out more about what Noble Life can do for you, please visit our website at www.noblehealthcoach.com. Noble Life also now has an online store where you can get apparel which is designed to remind and keep you in tune with the Noble Code and continuously strive towards better health and balance in our lives. You can check that out at our website at www.noblehealthcoach.com.